Baba kind of has wrist control.
At least he's relying on it.
Any package, shape, or size.
The devastating truth about Fit Finlay is that one of wrestling's toughest men was never treated like a true main event star. Right now, he still works inside WWE. He coaches young wrestlers, he helps plan matches. He shapes stories that fans never know he touched. Most viewers today have no idea who he is. His sons carry the family name forward in modern wrestling, but even they are not household faces to casual fans. Yet there was a time when Finlay's talent seemed capable of carrying him to the very top of the business. He was feared. He was respected. If this story has you thinking about what Finlay could have been, use the hype feature and give this video some hype so more fans can hear it. He was respected by the toughest men in the locker room, and he could wrestle any style against any kind of opponent, in any country, on any continent. He understood wrestling on a level that few people ever reach, a level built from decades of hard physical experience rather than natural size or a marketable look. But none of that turned him into a permanent main event star. His most famous WWE television relationship was not built around danger. It was built around comedy, tied to a small sidekick named Hornswoggle. And his backstage career, the one place where he seemed untouchable, ended with a firing caused by his own decisions. In March of 2011, Finlay was producing a live WWE event in Champaign, Illinois. He wanted the crowd to hate WWE champion The Miz before a huge match at WrestleMania. So he approved a moment where The Miz interrupted the United States national anthem. Soldiers were in the crowd that night. The reaction was furious. Within days, Finlay lost his job. That firing is where this story becomes complicated, because Finlay did not lose his job for being weak or unskilled. He lost it because of timing, injuries, and choices made over decades. Choices that pushed a brilliant wrestler further and further from the spotlight he seemed built for. His career is often described as a career of 5 separate stages, each one shaping the next. There was the European stage, where he learned to wrestle as a real physical craft. There was the American stage, where his toughness became famous, but his fame stayed limited. There was the WWE stage, where he became more valuable as a teacher than as a star. There was a short independent stage, where he proved his body could still perform at a high level. And there is the stage he is living through right now, back inside WWE, shaping wrestlers from behind the curtain. To understand why his path bent the way it did, we have to go back to the very beginning, long before WWE ever knew his name. Why should any of this matter to a modern wrestling fan who never saw Finlay wrestle live? Because his story is not really about one man's disappointment. It is about how a business decides who gets remembered and who gets quietly left in the background, even when the person in the background did more to shape the product than almost anyone standing in the spotlight. Finlay's story raises an uncomfortable question that stretches far beyond wrestling. What happens to genuine skill when timing, injury, and corporate decision-making all work against it at once? Fit Finlay's full name is David John Finlay Jr. He was born on January 31, 1958, in Carrickfergus, a small town in County Antrim, Northern Ireland. Wrestling was already in his blood before he ever stepped into a ring. His father, Dave Finlay Sr., was an amateur and professional wrestling coach, a man respected enough that decades later, in the 2024 New Year Honors, he received an MBE for his work with Olympic wrestling in Northern Ireland. Finlay's grandfather had also competed as a wrestler. This was not a man who discovered wrestling as a hobby or a TV fantasy. He grew up inside it, learning it as a physical craft, the same way a boxer learns from a father who boxed, or a farmer learns from a father who farmed. Finlay stepped into the ring for the first time in 1974. The opportunity came almost by accident. A wrestler failed to show up for an event run through his father's promotion in the small area of Glynn, and young Finlay filled the empty spot. For the next 4 years, he wrestled constantly around Carrickfergus and across Ireland, building the kind of experience that only comes from working night after night in front of small, demanding crowds. In 1978, he made the decision to move to England, where bigger opportunities existed. In England, Finlay joined Joint Promotions and became part of the British wrestling scene known as World of Sport. This was a tough, respected environment, and Finlay worked alongside and against well-known names of that era, including Jackie Palio, Orig Williams, and Brian Dixon. He also spent time working against and alongside Marty Jones and Danny Collins, gaining experience against a wide range of styles inside the same British system. His first taste of international television came in August 1980 during a tour of France. He teamed with a wrestler named Ian Gilmore, and together they were presented as the Scotsmen. They faced Guy Mercier and Alan Mitchells in a match that gave Finlay his first experience in front of cameras outside of Britain. 2 years later, Finlay won his first major singles championship. On June 9, 1982, he defeated Alan Kilby to capture the joint promotion's British heavy middleweight title. Around this same period, his character was built with the help of his then-wife, Princess Paula Valdez, who wore a striking headdress and played the role of a strict, demanding presence at ringside. Finlay also teamed with a wrestler named Skull Murphy, whose real name was Peter Northey, forming a tag team called the Riot Squad. That same year, the Riot Squad won the 1982 World of Sport Top Tag Team Tournament, cementing Finlay as one of the most complete performers in British wrestling. By his mid-20s, Finlay had already collected a singles championship and a tag team tournament victory, proof that his combination of size, toughness, and technical ability translated into real results wherever he competed. By the late 1980s, Finlay had moved on to a tougher stage. He joined Otto Wanz's Catch Wrestling Association, based in Germany and Austria. This was not an easy promotion to survive in. The style demanded serious conditioning, physical toughness, and the ability to compete in long tournaments without breaking down. Finlay thrived there, winning middleweight, intercontinental, and tag team championships across the CWA system. Wrestlers who came through that promotion were expected to work stiff, believable matches night after night, often across several countries in the same stretch of weeks. This European chapter of his career built the foundation for everything people would later associate with him: stiff strikes, believable violence, and a wrestler who felt more like a real fighter than a performer playing a role. Long before American audiences ever saw him, insiders across Europe already viewed Finlay as one of the toughest, most complete wrestlers working anywhere on the continent. But here's where the negative side of Finlay's story begins to take shape. All of this success, real championships, real toughness, real respect from other wrestlers, happened far from the eyes of the audience that would eventually matter most. By the time American fans discovered him, Finlay was already in his late 30s. He had already spent more than 20 years building a wrestling resume that most performers could only dream of. Yet almost none of it had been seen by the audience that decided who became a star in the United States. His European excellence made him a phenomenal wrestler. It did not make him famous. That gap between skill and recognition would follow him for the rest of his career. Wrestlers who worked with Finlay during these years often said the same thing about him. He treated every match like a real contest, even in front of small crowds in towns most fans could not find on a map. That habit forged over more than 1,000 matches across Ireland, Britain, Germany, and Austria, is exactly what made him so valuable once he finally reached a bigger stage. It also meant that when American audiences eventually met him, they were not meeting a rookie learning on the job. They were meeting a wrestler who had already spent 2 full decades mastering his craft in near total obscurity, a fact that made his limited ceiling in America even harder to justify. Finlay arrived in World Championship Wrestling in 1995, and his American television debut followed in early 1996 under the name Belfast Bruiser. In a wrestling landscape filled with cartoon characters and high-flying cruiserweights, Finlay stood out simply by being believable. His work looked like a real fight, not a performance. That reputation grew fastest through his rivalry with fellow European veteran William Regal, a wrestler who had come from a similarly hard background. Their orbital bone. This was not stage theater. It was a display of the same hard physical culture both men had come from, and it instantly told the American audience that Finlay was not to be taken lightly. That match made Finlay look dangerous and real. It did not make him a main event fixture. Instead, it defined the role WCW would keep giving him, the tough veteran who could make other wrestlers look legitimate simply by standing across the ring from them. He became the man companies trusted to elevate someone else, rather than the man positioned to be elevated himself. In late 1997, Finlay returned from a short absence with a new look. His hair was shorter and bleached blonde. His mustache was gone, and his name was simplified to Fit Finlay. This version of the character found real singles success. On the May 4, 1998 episode of Monday Nitro, Finlay defeated Booker T to win the WCW World Television Championship. That victory launched a rivalry involving Finlay, Booker T, and Chris Benoit, one of the most respected three-way feuds of that period, mixing hard-hitting brawling with detailed technical wrestling. During his reign, Finlay defended the TV championship against a long list of opponents, including Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chaos, The Renegade, Brad Armstrong, Jim Neidhart, Norman Smiley, and Psychosis. That range of opponents alone tells its own story. A former teenage prodigy, a masked cruiserweight, a giant, a seasoned veteran, and a rising technical wrestler, all asked to share the ring with Finlay at different points during the same championship reign. A workload that would exhaust most performers, but barely seemed to slow him down. He also wrestled Chris Jericho to a time-limit draw on WCW Saturday Night, proving he could adapt his hard-hitting style to a faster, more modern opponent. These matches showed a wrestler who could brawl, work technically, and adjust to almost anyone put in front of him, whether that opponent relied on speed, size, or technical precision. That kind of versatility is rare, and it is exactly the sort of trait that should, in theory, open the door to a company's biggest spotlight. In Finlay's case, it opened the door to something else entirely. A permanent role as the wrestler other performers were tested against, rather than the wrestler the company built its top storylines around. Yet even at his peak, the ceiling stayed low. Finlay eventually lost the TV championship back to Booker T at the Great American Bash. The TV championship, respected as it was, sat well below the top of WCW's card, several rungs beneath the World Heavyweight Championship picture. The company saw Finlay as a dependable, hard-nosed mid-card wrestler, not as a future face of the promotion. His toughness had become a tool that made other stars shine brighter, the same pattern that had followed him since his European days. As WCW's creative direction shifted toward hardcore wrestling, that tool was about to be tested in the most dangerous way possible. WCW's hardcore division threw Finlay into increasingly chaotic and dangerous matches. Environments built around weapons, tables, and unpredictable surroundings rather than structured wrestling holds. He won the first ever WCW Hardcore Junkyard Invitational at Bash at the Beach in July 1999, a match built around chaos rather than structure. That same month, during a hardcore match against Brian Knobbs at a house show in Jackson, Mississippi, Finlay was thrown into a table set up in the corner of the ring. The table broke apart, and a sharp piece of wood tore deep into his leg. The cut severed a nerve. According to the research, the injury nearly cost him the leg entirely, a devastating outcome for any professional athlete, let alone one whose entire career depended on physical mobility. This was not his only serious injury from that period. Finlay had also suffered nerve damage earlier in his WCW run that left him without normal feeling in one hand, a problem he simply learned to wrestle around without complaint. The leg injury, though, was far more severe. It forced him into a long and difficult rehabilitation process, one that kept him away from the ring for an extended stretch while doctors worked to save function in his damaged leg. Slowly, he regained use of his leg, and by late 2000 he returned to the ring as part of a group called the Hardcore Soldiers, alongside Brian Knobbs and Al Green. The comeback proved his toughness once again, but it did not restore the momentum he had built before the injury. WCW itself was running out of time, sliding toward its final collapse, and in March 2001, the company was purchased by WWE. Finlay's toughness had become something of a trap. His willingness to work through brutal, dangerous conditions built his reputation as one of the hardest men in wrestling. At the same time, it damaged the very body he needed to reach a higher level, wearing down the physical tools that had made his European and early WCW career so impressive. He continued wrestling for years afterward, but the injury marked a turning point that quietly limited what his career could still become, a cost that would not be fully understood until years later. Consider what that injury actually meant for a professional athlete already in his early 40s. A severed nerve does not heal on a simple timeline. It requires patience, careful rehabilitation, and no guarantee that full function will ever return. Finlay pushed through that uncertainty and came back anyway, which says as much about his character as any championship ever could. But every match he wrestled afterward, he wrestled on a leg that had once nearly been lost entirely. A fact that quietly shaped the physical limits of everything that followed. When WWE absorbed WCW, Finlay did not walk into the new company as a star. He walked in as a trainer and backstage producer, a role that said everything about how the business viewed him. He was sent to Ohio Valley Wrestling to help train WWE's developmental talent, a group that included future legends John Cena, Randy Orton, and Batista. Batista later called Finlay an unsung hero of his career, crediting him with helping turn a raw, powerful athlete into a complete performer capable of carrying entire storylines. Fred Rosser, who wrestled in WWE as Darren Young, said Finlay changed the way he delivered offense, teaching him to make every strike look and feel real rather than choreographed. Wrestler after wrestler who passed through his hands during this period pointed to the same thing. Finlay could take a talented but unfinished athlete and teach them how to make an audience believe in every move. Then came the assignment that would become, in many ways, Finlay's most important contribution to the entire wrestling business, even though almost nobody would ever know it. WWE placed him in charge of helping the women's division, then called the Divas. At that time, the women's presentation on WWE TV centered heavily on looks rather than athletic ability. According to the research, this era included bra and panties matches, mud wrestling, and characters built around modeling rather than wrestling skill, with short matches that rarely allowed the women to show real physical storytelling. Finlay himself said the assignment was treated as a low-priority job, almost a joke backstage, a task handed to him rather than something anyone fought to take on. Finlay refused to accept that the women could only pull hair and slap. He believed they could throw real strikes. He believed they could take hard, safe bumps. He believed their matches could tell serious stories, carrying the same physical weight as the men's matches on the same show. He worked closely with wrestlers including Trish Stratus, Lita Victoria, Molly Holly, Tori Wilson, and Jacqueline, pushing them toward a harder, more legitimate style of wrestling that most of the audience did not realize was being built quietly behind the curtain. Trish Stratus once told Finlay how frustrated she was with the limits placed on women's matches. Finlay encouraged her to use stronger strikes and more demanding moves. And some of that progress happened quietly, without a big company announcement, spreading match by match rather than through any single dramatic shift. Victoria credited Finlay with helping shape her entire wrestling character, and with making her physical matches against Stratus possible in the first place. According to the research, she believed his guidance was central to her success in the business, and that without his push toward realism, her career would have looked very different. The results of Finlay's work reached far beyond the wrestlers he trained directly. His foundation is connected, in the research, to the success of later stars like Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Bayley, women who eventually headlined the biggest shows WWE ever produced. Here is the irony that defines Finlay's entire career. This may have been his greatest contribution to professional wrestling, and it mostly happened away from the cameras. The women he helped build eventually reached main event stages that Finlay himself, as an active WWE wrestler, never reached. His value to the company kept growing, while his own personal fame stayed limited. WWE trusted him to build stars. It did not view him as one. Years later, when women finally headlined WrestleMania for the first time, very few casual fans connected that milestone back to a gruff Irish trainer who had quietly pushed for harder strikes and more believable stories a decade earlier. That absence of credit does not erase the work. It simply confirms how much of Finlay's real influence on professional wrestling has always lived outside the spotlight, hidden inside training sessions and quiet conversations rather than championship matches or televised moments. The women themselves knew what he had done for them, even if the wider audience never did. Think about how unusual that is inside any industry. A person can spend years building the foundation for someone else's success and never receive equal credit for it. That is exactly what happened to Finlay inside the women's division. He was not chasing personal glory when he pushed these wrestlers toward a harder style. He was trying to make the product better, match by match, without any guarantee that history would remember his part in it. That old-school culture cut both ways. During a backstage segment at Survivor Series, wrestler Maven needed to bleed for a camera shot focused on another performer. Finlay was responsible for cutting Maven's forehead. The normal method among wrestlers was to cut with the grain of the skin, reducing the size of the eventual scar. Maven later said Finlay cut against the grain of his skin as a backstage rib, leaving him with a permanent scar. It is a small story, but it reveals the harder, rougher culture that shaped how Finlay operated behind the scenes. The same instincts that had made him a legendary trainer and would later cause him serious trouble on a much bigger stage. By 2004, Finlay had recovered enough from his old nerve injury to think seriously about returning to the ring himself. WWE began airing comeback promos in December 2005, and on January 20, 2006, Finlay made his televised WWE in-ring debut against Matt Hardy on SmackDown. He was 47 years old. That age matters enormously to this story. By the time WWE finally presented Finlay as an active wrestler, he had already spent more than 3 decades in the business. His body had already absorbed years of stiff strikes, nerve damage, and one injury that nearly cost him a leg. Main event pushes at 47 years old were, realistically, never on the table, no matter how skilled the man stepping into the ring happened to be. His role instead became what it had always been backstage, making younger wrestlers look tougher and more believable through physical, credible matches, using decades of hard-earned experience to elevate the next generation rather than himself. Finlay's character was a proud, aggressive Irish brawler who carried a shillelagh and promised he loved to fight. He worked closely with rising star Bobby Lashley, helping prepare him for bigger opportunities. A role that placed Finlay once again in a familiar position, supporting someone else's rise rather than building his own. That pattern, first seen with Regal and WCW, then repeated with an entire generation of developmental talent at Ohio Valley Wrestling, was now playing out again on WWE's biggest stage. This time with Finlay as an active competitor rather than a backstage coach. In 2006, Finlay captured the WWE United States Championship, the biggest singles title of his WWE run, and he appeared in several major WrestleMania matches during this period, proving he could still perform on the largest stages the company offered. That version of Finlay was sometimes described as a rough, unapologetic heel, a wrestler who leaned fully into being disliked rather than chasing cheap popularity. It was an honest character built directly on the man underneath it, rather than a gimmick invented from nothing. That honesty made him easy to respect inside the locker room and easy for hardcore fans to appreciate. But it never translated into the kind of mainstream drawing power that turns a wrestler into a company centerpiece. Then came Hornswoggle. The pairing changed Finlay's WWE story in ways that cut in two directions. On one hand, Hornswoggle made Finlay far more recognizable to casual fans than any of his championship runs had managed to do. Their relationship, eventually revealed as father and son on TV, gave Finlay more time on camera and let him show humor and emotion that his tougher character rarely allowed. On the other hand, it softened the exact image that had made Finlay dangerous in the first place. He went from a feared European brawler to a protective comedy father figure, and some fans began remembering the jokes more than the violence that once defined him. The storyline gave him visibility, but it did not move him any closer to a world title program. And in some ways, it pulled his character further away from that possibility. From late 2007 into early 2008, Finlay repeatedly defended Hornswoggle from the Great Khali in a program that showed Finlay could anchor a larger entertainment-focused story rather than just a hard-hitting brawl. It still did not push him into the main event picture. The 2009 supplemental draft eventually separated Finlay from Hornswoggle, and later that May, Finlay suffered a legitimate eye injury. He returned briefly to the ECW brand before moving back to SmackDown. His final televised WWE match came on June 4, 2010, a 15-man battle royal won by Rey Mysterio. After that match, Finlay stepped back into his familiar role, this time full-time as a backstage producer. Looking back at that entire in-ring run, Finlay's skill was never in question. What limited him was timing. He arrived as an active WWE star nearly too late, carrying a body already damaged by decades of brutal matches, and much of his role was built around helping others rather than becoming the story himself. It was a run that proved everything about his ability and almost nothing about what WWE was willing to build around him. Now we return to the moment that opened this video, because the full story deserves to be told only once. In March 2011, Finlay was the lead producer at a WWE house show in Champaign, Illinois. The Miz was WWE champion at the time, preparing for a huge match against John Cena at WrestleMania XXZ. Finlay wanted the crowd to hate The Miz as much as possible before that match, so he approved a segment where The Miz interrupted the playing of the United States national anthem. National Guard members and active military personnel were in the crowd that night, and the reaction was immediate and serious. The moment created real problems between WWE and its military partners, a relationship the company had spent years carefully building. WWE released Finlay from his contract, and Finlay accepted responsibility, saying his only goal had been to build crowd hatred for The Miz. That was not the only issue from the same event. According to the research, Finlay had also approved an unscripted steel chair shot to the head, delivered by Sheamus to Daniel Bryan, as Bryan came through a suicide dive. WWE had a strict rule against direct chair shots to the head, a rule put in place for the safety of its performers. Management reacted strongly. The match was pulled from the WrestleMania card entirely, and that decision helped speed up Finlay's firing alongside the anthem controversy. 2 separate lapses in judgment on the exact same night. Finlay was not a malicious man. The problem here was judgment, not hatred toward the military or toward the United States. His old-school instincts had helped build champions for a decade, but those same instincts, built for a rougher era of wrestling, did not fit the corporate rules of the company he was working for in 2011. The same producer trusted to keep matches safe had approved a banned headshot. The same man known for reading crowds had badly misjudged a national anthem segment. His knowledge, so valuable for so many years, did not protect him from the consequences of that night. It looked, at the time, like the quiet end of everything he had built inside WWE. For a man who had spent more than 3 decades earning trust inside wrestling rooms across 3 continents, it must have felt like a brutal way for that trust to unravel, not through a lack of ability, but through 2 separate lapses in judgment, squeezed into a single night. After his release, Finlay spent 2011 and 2012 wrestling on the independent circuit, appearing for promotions including Evolve, Ring of Honor, Smash, and various European companies. Without a WWE character to maintain, Finlay became something closer to a final test for the next generation. A veteran that younger wrestlers had to prove themselves against using nothing but realism and timing, rather than flash or gimmicks. One of the standout matches from this run came at Evolve 9 on July 26, 2011, when Finlay faced Sami Callihan. According to the research, Finlay played the role of a wrestler completely unimpressed by Callahan's speed, shutting him down with hard strikes, technical wrestling, and a leaping tombstone piledriver. The match was praised for feeling unusually real, a rare quality for that era of independent wrestling. Finlay also worked high-level matches against Roderick Strong and Michael Elgin during this stretch, proving his in-ring ability had not disappeared, even in his mid-50s. Finlay's final match took place on December 22, 2012, at a European wrestling promotion event in Hanover, Germany. Earlier that same night, his son David Finlay Jr. made his own professional wrestling debut, facing Big Daddy Walter, a wrestler later known in WWE as Gunther. David won that match by disqualification. Later in the event, Fit Finlay and David teamed together against Robbie Brookside and Dan Collins in an Irish street fight. That match marked the official retirement of Fit Finlay, closing the book on his active wrestling career on the very same night his son's career began. A symbolic handoff from one generation of the Finlay family to the next. It was a fitting way to close a career built almost entirely on substance rather than spectacle. There was no arena full of cheering fans, no championship belt raised in victory, just a small European venue, a hard-fought street fight, and a father standing next to his son as one chapter of the family's wrestling story ended, and another one quietly began. Roughly a year after firing him, WWE brought Finlay back as a producer in 2012. Think about what that says. WWE had punished him for the decisions he made in Champaign. It still could not afford to lose the knowledge inside his head. His wrestling mind mattered more to the company than the controversy that had ended his previous run, a clear sign of exactly how valuable his backstage judgment had become over the years. Since returning, Finlay has worked as a producer, match planner, coach, and performance center trainer, continuing his long involvement with women's wrestling and developing talent for both NXT and the main roster. A small moment that became a key step on Lynch's path toward headlining WrestleMania 35. According to the supplied research, as of 2026, Finlay remains involved at the WWE Performance Center, working alongside Shawn Michaels, Matt Bloom, Terry Taylor, Norman Smiley, Sarah Amato, and Jazz, a team responsible for shaping much of WWE's next generation of talent. Finlay's legacy now continues through his 2 sons, who chose very different paths. His son Brogan Finlay was born on August 26, 2002. He signed with WWE in late 2023 and was renamed Uriah Connors, making his NXT debut on March 5, 2024 against Shawn Spears. Trained through the WWE Performance Center, Brogan has been publicly supported by his father, and in 2026, he joined a new WWE faction called Birthright, built around wrestlers with well-known family names inside the industry. Other members of that group, according to the research, included Lexis King, Charlie Dempsey, Channing Lorenzo, and Ariana Grace, a faction whose entire identity leaned into fan resentment over nepotism inside wrestling families, turning the Finlay name itself into part of the storyline. It is a strange kind of full-circle moment. Decades after Finlay entered wrestling because his own father ran a promotion, his son now performs inside a storyline built entirely around the idea that wrestling families receive unfair advantages, using the very bloodline that once helped shape the business as its own source of crowd hostility. Finlay's other son, David Finlay, took a completely different road. Born on May 16, 1993, David entered the New Japan Pro Wrestling Dojo system in 2015, choosing an international path rather than his father's American system. Over the following years, David won the Never Openweight Championship and the IWGP Tag Team Championship alongside Juice Robinson, captured the 2025 New Japan Cup, and held the IWGP Global Heavyweight Championship. He eventually led a group connected to the Bullet Club name. According to the supplied research, when his contract with New Japan expired, WWE wanted him to join his brother in the developmental system, but David chose instead to sign with AEW. Building an identity independent from the WWE path, his father had spent decades helping construct a decision that placed the two Finlay brothers on entirely separate stages within the same industry. That decision carries real weight when placed next to everything Finlay Sr. had spent his life building. Here was a father who had helped shape WWE's developmental system from the inside, who had trained future champions and rebuilt an entire division. And his own son chose a different company entirely, rather than start over inside that same system after already becoming an accomplished international champion. It was not a rejection of his father. It was a choice to build something separate, on his own terms, after already proving himself on a global stage far from home. Bring all of this together, and Fit Finlay's story splits into three separate legacies. There is the visible wrestler, the one fans remember from TV who never reached the true main event level his talent suggested he deserved. There is the hidden coach, the man who quietly helped reshape an entire division of professional wrestling and helped build champions who reached heights he never did himself. And there is the father whose two sons carried the Finlay name forward through completely different companies, choosing separate paths rather than one shared legacy. Each of these three legacies tells a slightly different story, yet all three point back to the same conclusion about the man at the center of them. None of these three legacies alone fully explains why Finlay's story matters. Together, though, they paint a picture of a man whose value to professional wrestling was never limited to championships or TV time. His toughness opened doors for others. His teaching reshaped an entire generation of performers. His family name now stretches across two of the largest wrestling companies on earth, carried forward by sons who grew up watching him give everything he had to a business that never fully gave him the spotlight in return. Somewhere inside a WWE Performance Center training room right now, Fit Finlay is likely still teaching a young wrestler how to make a punch look and feel real. Almost none of the fans watching that wrestler on TV will ever know Finlay's name, and Finlay himself seems to have made peace with that fact a long time ago. His story was never about chasing recognition. It was about doing the work, night after night, decade after decade, and trusting that the work itself would matter, even if the credit never followed him home. That quiet, patient trust, more than any title he ever won, may be the truest measure of the man, and it is a measure that no championship belt or television storyline could ever fully capture on its own, no matter how the record books remember him. Fit Finlay never became the top star he could have been, but he helped make many others great, and that is why his name still matters.